We are stepping into a conversation today of endings with grace. And what we mean by that is being able to move from one thing to another thing, whether that's a job, a relationship, a house, a city, a situation, a community, whatever that is.
Even a group of friends.
A group of friends without having to blow your life up or for things to get really nasty. Right? You know, Violet had an amazing statement this morning, and I'm going to quote what she said because I think it was just so beautiful and encapsulated this perfectly. You know, when you're trying to make a decision about things and you don't quite want to cross into that line of actually taking action, and then you start building some of those false realities, or you start going like, maybe it's paranoid or fear thoughts, or maybe you start actually creating situations where it gets even more uncomfortable. Well, here's what Violet said to that. She said, if it's really a yes to move on to greener pastures, you won't need to make someone else or the situation you're in the villain in your story in order to follow it. So I think if you guys are all just starting to listen to this, what I'd love for you to do is just bring up a time in your life where you blew something up in order to move on.
Yeah. Or maybe you don't even see it as you blowing it up. Maybe you just see it as the situation got so bad that you just couldn't do anything but leave. Like you had no other choice.
Yeah. And this could be in any direction. This could be family. It could be relationships, career. It could be anything. Mm-hmm. You know, when I was younger, I feel like I should start telling school uphill both ways stories now in my ripe old age, almost 35. When I was younger, I used to do this with people relationships because I had a really hard time saying goodbye. And instead of just moving on and being able to step into the next circle I required to be in, or into the next opportunity that would present, I would start feeling really off or nitpicking things. And instead of finding all the highlights about why I loved being with that person in the first place, I would start finding all the lowlights and the things that were wrong with them, or the situations or the things we got into. And I would start building all these stories and false realities about our relationship and what was going on there. And it would get to the point because, you know, in my younger age, I was a little gossip pants. It was like my second favorite activity. I was then like trying to get other people to validate how I was feeling by sharing my points of view and being like, have you seen this too? Oh my God, like, have you had this interaction? And like, have you had this experience with them? Because blah, 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 right? Like all these things falling on my face. And so instead of me just honoring what was coming up, like, I'm not comfortable in this situation, or this isn't serving me anymore, or whatever, I then had to go rally the troops. I had to go rally the troops and be like, guys, guess what? This is what's going on. Do you know what she said? Blah, 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 right?
She's toxic. Let's grab the pitchforks.
Yeah, right? Like, lamb roast. Okay, we're all going to rally. Here's our new group chat about this. And we're going to just bitch witch all the way along. And then finally it would get so bad that somebody would explode. And then we could validate all our false realities we had built up by melding all of our stories together, that we were like, there, see, proof.
I did it with a job.
You did it with a job? What did you do?
Bad. Oh my gosh. One of my first jobs out of high school. So I was like 19, it was over the summer, and I was working multiple jobs because, you know, I needed the money and that's what I was doing. So I was working at this restaurant. I was a terrible waitress, you guys. I'm like,
I've seen you in your like trying to serve people in that way. Like, I don't think so.
It's not for me. It was not a good job for me. And so I made it so bad that I ended up getting sick because I was so stressed about it. And so I went into work one day because I was like, I have no choice. I have to. When I was sick. And then I was having a conversation with Daryl. Actually, this is when we first started dating. And he said something really funny and made me laugh. And so my boss came out and was like, doesn't look like you're too sick because you're laughing. And I I like freaked out on him and I yelled at him in front of the whole restaurant and I walked out. It was so dramatic. But the funny thing is, the moment I got home, I didn't feel sick anymore and I felt really good. So I knew it was time to leave. I actually knew it was time to leave like in my first week of working there because I was just such a bad waitress. But I held on because I didn't feel comfortable quitting a job because I'd never really done it before.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
I've never done that since, but oh my gosh, it was so dramatic.
Yeah. So one of the things that happens, you guys, is when we're in these situations, a lot of times our Akashics are showing. And our woundings and our insecurities are showing. And that certainly was the case for me in that situation. And I'm sure it was for Violet if we picked it apart. And likely at that time, what we would find if we really dug down to the core root of it is there was something in us where we felt like we couldn't advocate for ourselves and actually make a choice for self. There was likely some kind of external stimulus or something that was bumping into our field that was making us go, I'm going to be judged. This is wrong. I'm going to not live up to expectations. Maybe there was something in there about follow through and accountability. Maybe there was something in there about, the person people think you are, not necessarily who you actually are.
Or a sense of failure by leaving.
That too. Yeah. So there could be anything down at the core root of it. But at the end of the day, when we're in those situations where things have gotten to the expiry point and we've pulled up the lessons, we've done the reconciliation, we've looked around us and the relationship or the community or the job or whatever it is truly not in a state of that sacred reciprocity where it's serving us and we're serving them, that's when we need to end things with grace and be willing to actually step out of that situation and thank the circle involved for thank you for everything to this point. I'm going to honor my yes, and it's time for me to move on. Why is that so freaking hard for people?
I don't know, honestly. There seems to be a collective fear of confrontation happening in a lot of us, to the point where almost like we create a situation where our only choice is a massive confrontation.
But that's choice. Ultimately,
it's totally
that's choice to even engage in the confrontation, right? Yeah. As an example, let's use some examples from our community, actually, because on the regular basis, here's a little business advice for everybody too. When you are running an online membership, you're going to have something called a churn rate. And the churn is the percentage of people that leave your membership on a monthly basis. The industry average is about 6 to 7, sometimes up to 8, 10% per month churn rate on a monthly membership like we have here in HRA. Mm-hmm. Ours is between 1 to 3%, depending on the time of year. This time of year is always higher. We kind of get into that 4% threshold. In those 3% of people, there's a bunch of different archetypes they play. And Violet, maybe you could talk through these ones because you've been on this end more than I have lately and the customer service end.
When I was doing customer service, I saw every different way that people tried to leave our community. And I found it, at first I was like, oh, why are you doing this? And now I find it actually kind of entertaining because it's pretty consistent. It's 1, 2, or 3. Those are your options. And so we've got the people who do exit gracefully. They send an email in and they go, hey, this just isn't for me, or I'm moving on to something else that's taking my focus, school, a new job, something else that I'm really excited about. I wish you guys well. Thank you so much for everything so far. I'm ready to leave now. And those ones are really nice to deal with because you just email them back and you go, hey, congratulations. I'm so happy for you. Have fun in your next adventure. I'm canceling everything right now. No problem. Those are the easy ones. It's a one and done, really quick situation. But then we have people who try to ghost us, which I find really entertaining. They'll try to cancel their membership payment in the back end either through their bank. They'll actually go through the effort of calling their bank to try to cancel it that way, rather than talk to us about it. Or they do it directly through PayPal. And we of course get notifications when that happens. And then we have to follow up and be like, was this an accident? Did you do this on purpose? Do you actually want to leave? And then we're in a space of not knowing what they actually wanted to do until they get back to us. And either they will respond or they still won't.
Yeah, because sometimes PayPal will just cancel people's accounts randomly. We've had that happen so many times this year.
There are tech glitches, things happen. So we have to follow up and be like, did you mean to do this? Or was this an accident that we need to look into and fix? And then they'll either continue to ghost us and we're continuing to try to contact them. And then eventually we have to make the call to just cancel everything and remove them. Or they'll get back to us and be really defensive. Like, I should be allowed to leave. And we're like, we didn't say you couldn't. We're just asking, right? And then there's the third one, which is the bridge burners. These guys like to blow things up in order to leave. So they will either rally the troops like Caitlin used to do in her friend group, rally a bunch of other members to be like, these guys are awful, and whatever stories they want to tell about what it is we're doing, and then either stay in the community until we kick them out. So they're putting the responsibility of making that decision on us, or they'll actually reach out to us and let us know that they want to leave, but they'll give us all the reasons why. And it's like a crazy story that they've created. And I'm like, you didn't have to go that far. Like, we're fine if you want to leave. There's really no issue with it, you know? So interesting ways that people choose to exit the community. And the ones who choose to leave gracefully are the easiest ones to deal with. And they're the quickest ones to get over with. They're the fastest ones to actually get out and leave the cleanest. So,
well, and truth be told, like this is more on that end about us too. Mm-hmm. We have a choice at that point. And you guys, you need to figure out how you're going to overlay what we're sharing in your own life in mm-hmm. regards to like stacking this into, oh yeah, how do I actually leave gracefully with people? How do I leave gracefully from jobs? How do I ghost? How do I burn bridges? Like, we're just sharing an example that happens here, on our end to give you guys a little bit of a story thread, but you need to take it and look at how that happens, right? The grace, the ghost, and the bridge burner in your own life in these different directions. But at the end of the day, when people choose to leave gracefully, if the other receiving party doesn't want them to leave with grace and brings a confrontation, it's actually your choice whether you want to engage or not.
Yeah.
Like the situation this morning I had to jump in and handle, I had a choice to go into confrontation or not, or just say, hey, here's the boundary. Right? Here's the boundary. You can go spin out over here, do what you want to do. Here's the boundary. I'm staying in this grace and grit space. That's it. That's all there is to it. You don't actually have to engage in the fight. And so one of the things I really want to give you guys permission to do, if you haven't already given permission to yourself, is you're allowed to not engage in drama. You're allowed to actually assert your position and say, hey, I'm happy to witness you in this, but this does not feel like an energy I want to engage in. I'm standing by my decision. Thank you for everything. Sign off.
Yeah.
Close the door, right? And I mean, I get there's situations where that's tricky because especially like in marriages where there's kids involved and money involved and assets and things like that, there's a whole different level of considerations because now all of a sudden there's fights over these material things and what we perceive as value versus non-value and what we perceive as how we went in and how we are coming out and was there equal value in our contributions. And so that brings in a whole new layer of communication and drama that can present. But
because you're going into a negotiation, which is a different story than just choosing to leave.
Yes. And so we have to separate those two things in our minds as we're going through these stages, because what I see so many people do is they stack them all together to avoid making the first choice. Because they know the uncomfortable part could be coming, right? Like ultimately we know that the negotiation might not go the way we want. And so we avoid making the choice in the first place to just say, hey, like, I feel complete here. I need to step out of this. This is my decision. Thank you. Right? We know in a relationship situation, there could be fallout from that or consequences, both to the positive or negative because of the choice we've made. But we first have to honor the yes that we've had. The rest is all inconsequential at this point, right? It's irrelevant. When we don't advocate for ourselves, though, when we don't take ourselves out of those situations and we don't attack this with that grace, our body shows us everything that's wrong. And, just like many of the other things we've talked about, like an emotional backlog, this is another way that we emotionally and mentally backlog our systems and we allow our patterning from our Akashics and our behaviors from this lifetime to pour through and show, our body will start to go down into some kind of congestion, slow down, and then maybe into disease in response to the lack of choice and movement that we're currently choosing. And so by not advocating and ending things gracefully and stepping on to the next platform, even if that next platform is currently unknown, we're also saying to the body, I'm not ready to honor the message yet. I'm not willing to listen to you yet. I'm not willing to change the circumstances enough to heal you. 9 times out of 10, you guys, the clients that come in my office are sick because they won't choose. And that's a pretty scary thing to look at, because when, as a healer, as a life coach, as an intuitive, as a channeler, all of these things, when I look at the disempowerment programming running in so many of the clients I see and members of our community, and then you tell me about the things that are going on in your body, I'm like, dude, all you have to do is literally make the choice to put that situation behind you and then do the next right thing that follows that decision. That's it. And you will begin to heal. Yes, I can support you through that. Yes, I can help you collapse the old Akashics, but there ain't no amount of clearing in this world I can do that will replace that action step. Mm-hmm. And that's really important to understand. So the other thing that goes into this whole situation, Violet, that we can talk about is how we continue to build up those false realities that then make it seem almost impossible to clear.
Oh, yeah.
Right? When we're in the thick of that drama, or we're trying to make these decisions, you know, the first moment we had that decision, it was clear, right? We could see it. We were like, yeah, that makes sense.
And it probably came at a weird time. Like for me, what I find is I'll be like doing the dishes and I'll just get a thought of like, okay, I think it's time to leave my job. Right. Or I think I've had enough conversations with this friend, like our interactions lately just haven't really been going anywhere, lighting me up. And it's just a minor thought. And then I dismiss it.
Yeah. When we then dismiss it or disqualify it, right? Because that's another big word we need to talk about a lot lately. People are using this, but, right? Inserts. Yeah. When we dismiss it like that, our intuition, our body, and our soul go, okay, we drop the message. Let's see what they do. Let's see what they do. And you'll go on and you'll probably come up with some justifications. Well, I have to see this through because I have to continue relationships with this person because for me as a coach, I have to serve them all the way through because they paid me. Okay.
Or I have to stay at this job because I need the money.
No, you don't.
Right?
No, you don't. You could choose something different, right? Yeah. But what we tend to do is we tend to get ridiculously uncomfortable because we have this thing in humanity that's running, and you guys let me know if this is you. I'd love to hear about this, where we wait till things are so flippin' uncomfortable. We're so sick. We're so tired. We're so frustrated. We're so angry, overwhelmed, anxious, whatever it is, that we literally have no choice at that point but to do something different or feel like we're dying. People bring things to an absolute exit stage left at the point where they've already done damage to their physical, mental, spiritual, emotional well-being. But it doesn't have to be like that.
Even though it's kind of effective.
It is kind of effective because it will pivot you. Absolutely it will. This is what those big dark nights of the soul are, right? This is when people won't choose and they won't honor those messages and they're stubborn, you know, and I was there with my farm. Honestly, if I had honored the messages I had instead of listening to the external people, I wouldn't have gone through that full dark night of the soul. Now, that being said, there was value to it. 100%, learned a lot. But damn, was I a hot mess through it, right? But what happens in that state, as soon as we bypass or we disqualify that information, is we start to try and put threads together in a couple of different directions. One of the ways we try and tie the threads is to say, this is why I should stay. But then we start building up all of the pros cons list. I actually hate pro cons lists.
God,
like I wish people would not use them. I think
I used to use them,
things.
And afterwards I always felt more confused than when I went into it.
Right? They're useless. But anyways, another topic, another day. Podcast, how I weigh out decisions. Anyways, it'll be like 5 seconds. This or that. This. Okay, let's go. We have the pros list where we weave all the threads as to, this is why I have to put my stake in the stand and stay here. Like, I've invested in this kind of career college. I only have this many months left till retirement. This is how much money I'm making. I want to get my pension or my 401k, right? We put our stake in the sand. But then we start building all the stories and we try to honor our information that we got by looking at all the negatives. And we're like, oh, but I hate these coworkers and I feel so tired and I don't feel good when they're in their fluorescent lights and this person's a jerk face to me or whatever it is. And we start finding all the cons. But then the things start crossing wires because our brain can only hold separate containers for so long. It's actually statistically proven that we can only tell the same story once.
Yeah,
in the same way.
It morphs every time.
It morphs every single time. And it might just be like a tiny detail, but your brain will go and grab these threads and it starts interlinking them. And so what happens is now we've got a false reality starting to build. And that false reality starts building up pictures, emotions, energies, and stories that weren't there in the first place, but now have clouded the original message to a new level of density that it gets even harder to see the way out. And if we had just acted the first time when everything was clear, the path would have been open and easier. I'm not necessarily saying the actions are easy, because sometimes we have hoops we have to jump through or new skills we have to learn, but there wouldn't have been all this emotional clutter of all the things we couldn't figure out and all the emotions and the people and the chords and the contracts we had to play out. Now, the other problem to this is when you build all of these threads and you start tying all these negativity, or you building the false realities or the toxic thought patterns, you're actually ushering a form of curse work and amplifying the cords you already have that are going to make your Akashics even denser and harder to wade through next time. And so by not honoring that, yes, you're actually making more cleanup work for yourself and almost guaranteeing yourself a space in the Bardos to come back here next time.
This is how we end up recycling these like relationships with certain souls in different lifetimes that are just like not supportive. Like if you create a huge explosion in leaving a job, for instance, and you don't clean that up and you just walk away, there's a very good chance that you and your boss are going to end up reincarnating and playing out the same kind of drama in some other kind of a form, right? So this is one of the ways that we create those karmic tethers to other people, these cords and contract situations that are creating a situation where we then have to learn to advocate for ourselves at some point in another timeline.
Yeah. So as an example, let's take I always want to say burn bridgers, but it's bridge burners that have built false realities about us, Violet.
Yeah.
As an example. So let's say they get annoyed or triggered by me for some reason, or I don't placate their desires or whatever it is. They've got a story, they've got a first trigger that they've layered into. Mm-hmm. The instant they flip that into a negative thought, if I was willing to play in their field, it would turn into a form of actually a psychic attack. Okay. The next thing they do, where they start to rally the troops and they get their circle of friends to come in, they actually create a form of binding on the cords and contracts that they already have established that now adds a new layer of we're all at war. It's us against them. Then, and this isn't a current situation right now, you guys, this is past, like just FYI, because I can feel just people asking, they're like, who is this? We're just bringing things up from the past for a relationship story. Mm-hmm. So they've got this circle of people now that they've just amplified at the web and all the cords and contracts. And now they've got all these other people that they are contractually obligated to figure this out with each other. Mm-hmm. Okay. Then when all of them start adding in all the false reality and story, they add Akashic records on top of that to
Because
all the data sets where they haven't advocated, or they have gone into a huge overwhelm with emotions, or where they haven't like followed through with their stuff. Yeah, go ahead.
Because they're adding a lot of emotionality to the situation. It's like adding layers of frustration and shame and whatever emotions are coming up, and it's creating like a hormonal surge in the body. And every time they tell that story or add more to it, it creates a bigger effect in the body. It's reacting, right? And that's where the Akashic records get laid down.
Yeah. And then they cement. Now they're in the field. Now this is sitting with soul, but soul has a desire to never be unreconciled. Soul is really interesting because it doesn't like having open tethers. And if there's a storyline still amplified and running, it sees it as an unreconciled like lesson or energy thread that it has to keep focus on until it can weave that into the 12D map and move on to the next thing. And so the reason most people can't access their 12D information and everything they are, their source points, all that data, is because they have unreconciled data that they're still dismissing, bypassing, not acting on, following through. And it's concentrating all of their energy over here and keeping them from everything they are. Right? So people don't realize this. By bypassing and not actually going with grace and reconciling your stuff and keeping these awful situations in play where your emotions, your hormones, your mind, your body become obsessed or angry or whatever it is, you're holding you back from you and the wholeness that you are. And that is more frustrating than the situation that's in front of you, if you ask me. Mm-hmm. But who knows? I could be wrong. So this brings definitely new depth to the whole story about your Akashics are showing. And I think we need to wrap up with a little bit of like, how do you move on?
Yeah.
How do you move on? How, when you honor that yes, and your historical patterning has been to go into fight or flight, how do you just go with grace?
So my first tip would be try as best as you can to notice the original trigger or the original thought that said, okay, it's time to move on. Mm-hmm. That doesn't always happen. But if we can set the intention that going forward, I really want to catch it early, that's going to help. I think a lot.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I usually try to wait until I have figured out what the information was about. Mm-hmm. So this could be milliseconds and it could be a couple of days. I'll walk you through my process. Mm-hmm. Let's say there's a relationship that's driving me bananas and I get that message, it's time to end the relationship. That doesn't necessarily mean, like, let's say it was between me and Violet. Let's say this morning I woke up and my higher self was like, Caitlin, you and Violet are done. I'm not going to call up Violet this morning and be like, so my higher self said I was done with you. Thank you for everything. It's been a great ride. I'm firing you, changing all my passwords. Goodbye. Like, I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to track it a little bit and ask a question. I'm going to use my truth testing. I'm going to use my tracking. I'm going to ask some questions and go, what is this actually about? And that message may have been how you guys have been operating. Needs to change. Done. This chapter needs to close. And now we're opening a new chapter. And if I didn't ask the question about it and follow through on that, I might have just let go of one of the most important relationships in my life. Right? So I like to just sit with it for a second and go, okay, what else could this mean? Right? And write some questions and then see which ones want to light me up and follow through.
And then if you have an emotional trigger within that process, you address that first before making a story. Like that's the big part about it. Oh, I notice my body's having a reaction here, or I'm having an emotion come up, or a thought just came in my head. Does that actually serve me in this process? Or is this something I need to clear?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So then, because I got that second part of the message, I might say to Violet, hey, I got this crazy download this morning that was like, you and Violet are done. And then I asked another question. It's like, okay, we have to close a chapter. can we do a little micro pod here and bounce on all the ways that we've been operating that we actually don't want to bring forward into the next line? And this is something Violet and I are actually doing, FYI. This is why I'm using it as an example.
Like, this is highly relevant.
Yeah, Violet's like, wait a second, this story is true.
Yeah.
It is true, because Violet and I, you know, we grew faster than we thought we were going to.
Yes. I thought it was like a 5-year plan, not like a 7-month plan.
Sorry, joke's on you. When you come to work with me, it's just like, you thought you were going to do this. No, rocket ship. Anyways, so what we've realized is how we've been operating is constantly putting out fires. What do we mean by that? It's like, oh, this isn't working, terminate, get rid of that. Oh God, this is in chaos. We need to clean up this system. Oh shit, we need a student practitioner agreement because people are taking our copyrighted material and selling it on the interwebs or giving it to their friends. Oh, okay, now we have to put an agreement in place. Oh, people think they can advertise Healers Rising as a thing, as their training ground. No, okay, now we need to add that in. So we've just constantly been like having to chase all these pieces as we've been learning, but it was exhausting. And so let's take the example of this message. I could come to Violet and I could say, hey, I think there's some elements here we're ready to let go of in how we've been operating and behaving. And I think this is an opportunity for us to pivot this and try some new habits or behaviors on. What have you noticed? Yeah. And we could go in and we can have conversation, right?
Yeah, we do it all the time. And that's the important part. Instead of Caitlin coming in and going, this is what I think it means, and this is what I think we have to do, she'll be like, this is the message I got. What have you been picking up on lately? And then I'd be like, actually, that's really interesting. I just had a thought yesterday about how we need to change, blah, blah, blah. And she'll be like, that totally makes sense, or whatever, right? Or maybe that's not quite right and it's a distraction. But then we go into like tracking and potting about it, and not this back and forth where it's like, well, you're like this and I'm like this, and that doesn't work for me, because it's not about
it doesn't work.
It's not about that, right?
Yeah. So that's a tool I use in relationships all the time, especially when it's somebody who I already know is very important to me, right? So I use this with my kids, I use this with Violet, I use this with my staff, because all of my team go through stuff at different times. And I have to track it through. And instead of making big stories, I have to go, okay, what's this actually about? Okay, we're ending a cycle with this. This is changing. They're going to go through a transition period. What do I have to do? How do I have to support? Right. And then have a discussion about it. We just did one with another team member yesterday, actually 2 team members yesterday, where we use this same process. And if those team members listen to this, they'll be like, oh, I see this in play now. I know exactly what happened. Right.
Yeah.
So that's one way you guys can look at this, where it's not coming to a complete end. But let's say you're one of the people that's like, okay, Healers Rising isn't doing what I want it to do for me anymore. I've gotten what I've taken. I've watched all the lessons I've applied. It's just not lighting me up, or whatever. You want to end it with grace? Send our customer service team a quick email. Hi, thank you for my time in Healers Rising. I've checked in and it's time for me to move on to something else. I'd love assistance with canceling my account, please. Sincerely, you. Great. Thanks for sharing that with us. We actually don't need your justification. I don't need to know where you're going. I don't need to know what you're doing for something like that. Like, thank you.
But if you want to share, we'll congratulate you.
Yeah, totally will.
Yeah, but you don't need to justify it. Any choice you're making, if it's the right one for you, you don't need to justify it.
Totally. And honestly, if you try to justify it to somebody like me, I'm going to be like, dude, your Akashics are showing, and let me help you clear that on the way out. Mm-hmm. Because I'm like, you don't need to carry that around anymore, my friends, right? You don't need to carry that around anymore. If you are looking at this from a relationship you know needs to fully terminate, right? That you're like, no, this has been abusive, narcissistic, like this is actually physically, emotionally, mentally damaging to the point where we can't come back together, because that is also a possibility. Mm-hmm. Your lesson in that for ending with grace might be taking a deep breath and just being like, it's okay for me to know I have to leave. That's it. There's no justification to the person. There's no telling them, this is what you're doing to me. This is how you hurt me. This is what's going wrong in our life. It's okay for me to leave and to walk away, right? That's it. That's
That
it.
actually going into it that way, not needing to justify, that's a really good tip. If you're noticing you feel the need to justify, there's more cleanup for you to do before you go into this interaction. If there's nothing for you to justify and you're just done, it takes all the like wind out of the sails of it, and there's nothing to create a fire from because all the oxygen is gone from it. And the other person may come back and try to fight you on it, but they're going to have a lot less ammo in that moment because you're just like, nope, I'm okay. I'm complete now.
You know what I recommend you guys? Go watch the last episode of The Good Place.
Oh yeah. That's such a great show.
It's so good. Go watch all the episodes of The Good Place. I love it. Forking shirt balls. Anyways, in the last episode, they realize that this utopian way of being where you exist forever in this one body and you can have everything you want and you manifest, they're having these thought forms of like, oh my gosh, I've literally done it all and now there's nothing left. Like I need to go in peace. And every single one of the characters, as they're getting ready to close out the show, because they developed this portal where you go back to universe. I wonder where they got that idea from. They come to this moment where it's peaceful and they go, I'm complete. I'm complete. I'm ready to go. Right. And that's it. It's just, and they do one last rager with their people or one last dinner or whatever it was for that person. And then they go through the portal and they go back to source. Why can't we go with the same grace and get to that peace point within self where we go, I've gathered everything I require, the lessons, the understanding, the knowledge of who I was and who I came here to be in this relationship, in this career, in whatever this is.
And I'm grateful for the experience.
Yeah, I'm grateful. And
I'm done.
I'm done.
We can. That's the thing.
We can, we should, and we will. Right? Could you imagine how many more doorways would open for you if you operated like this?
We would waste so much less time. It would just be like, oh, I'm here. Now I want to be over there. Now I want to be over there. Instant manifestation. Like that's what that feels like to me.
Yeah. And actually that's what instant manifestation really is acting on the initial knee jerk and following through. Yeah. Right. So I would love for you guys to just sit back from all of this and just look at the different ways that you have played in those 3 different archetypes: the go with gracer, the Irish ghoster, and the bridge burner. And look at where you're applying them, because that'll give you a really good clue as to where your cleanup work is next, where your focus is, and what's holding you back from really being all of who you came here to be. Go look at the places where you're trying to get validation and rally the troops. Go look at the places where you have to group message somebody before you make a decision. Go look at the places where you're like having to get somebody else to say, yeah, good job, before you actually go and do something.
Or where you're deciding that other people in your experience are toxic before you make a decision. Some of them might be, but I think there's a lot less toxic people than people claim there to be. Like I hear about it a lot. So yeah, not everybody in your experience is toxic.
No, you just have triggers to it.
Yeah.
Anyways, we just won't go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah.
I hope this conversation was helpful for you guys. For sure, if you have more questions you want to ask, you guys can leave us a comment below, send in an email to the team, put it on the wall, however this wants to look. And if you guys have things you would like to cover in an upcoming conversation in consciousness with Violet and I, for sure, let us know. We're happy to attack all sorts of these tough conversations to help you guys navigate through life. All right, you guys, we will see you in the next one. Adios.